Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Today we're talking about episode 75, A Pup in Paris. As usual, we'll start with a brief summary of the episode. Maxwell is rushing off to Paris because his younger brother Nigel bought a nightclub and the family is concerned that he's throwing his inheritance away while Fran is preparing to take Chester to the groomer for Cece. Maxwell grabs the wrong bag Fran gave him, and Fran is forced to purchase a one-way ticket on Cece's credit card to get on the plane to switch the bags. Yet, she gets trapped in the first-class cargo hold and gets a free trip to Paris. In Paris, Fran and Maxwell are forced to share a room because the hotel is fully booked due to the opening of the new Andrew Lloyd Webber musical. After Nigel misinterprets their relationship, the brothers bicker over his investment and business acumen, and Nigel storms off. Fran and Maxwell spend the day together shopping, eating, and sightseeing before dropping by Nigel's nightclub. Maxwell is inspired by his brother's passion and decides that he's going to grab the brass ring, get back in touch, and just do, recognizing that he's wasting the opportunity to enjoy Paris with a beautiful woman. Instead of the passionate night that audience hopes for, he and Fran find themselves on the first flight back to New York. The plane hits terrible turbulence, leading them to believe that the flight is going to go down. Believing that they're spending their last moments on Earth, or above Earth, together, Fran and Maxwell kiss, and he tells her, "I love you." And that's not just the end of the episode, that's the season. Bernadette, do you want to add anything?
To be continued. I
Exactly.
did have a quick question.
Yeah.
With the free ride to Paris, that was sarcasm?
Okay. Yeah.
Because
it was,
she's paid for it.
Well, Cece's paid for it.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. And she's obviously not getting a refund.
Exactly.
Since she took it off the plane.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So yeah. So for this episode, we open up in the kitchen where there is Fran and Niles. And Niles is telling Fran that Grandma Yetta is on her way over. But, he offered to send her the limo and stuff. He doesn't know why she said no. And Fran explains, well, at her age, she's not looking to stretch out in the back of any long black car.
Exactly.
Cece walks in. Niles, do you have any food for the pup to eat? And he, of course, says, sure. What are you in the mood for? And she, again, fires back, threatening to fix him like she fixed Chester.
Exactly.
And Chester with him. And then she says to Fran, Nanny, fine, here's my credit card. And apparently what's happening is that Fran is going to be taking Chester to the groomers. And to prep Chester, apparently, there's a black bag that they'll put him in, and Cece has already tranquilized him. And Fran notes that, and let's see here. Her mom accidentally took a doggy tranquilizer before. She thought it was a Dexatrim. And, Cece's like, oh, well, what happened? Well, she ate out of a big bowl, licked herself clean. Basically nothing happened.
Exactly.
And at that point, Maxwell and Barton enter. Maxwell's on the phone with his mother. And, he's saying that he's on his way. And as he's still on the phone, he is carrying into the room another black bag, and he sets it down on the floor just as Fran sets down the black bag with Chester inside.
Yep.
And Maxwell finally kind of ends the phone call by saying, I like you very much too. And again, he's talking to his mother. So Fran, of course, comments on that. I like you very much too. When are you going to cut that umbilical cord already?
Right.
And explains that he has to go to Paris. Nigel, his younger brother, has bought some seedy nightclub in Paris, and he's kept telling his parents and stuff that um, you should wait until you're 30 before getting money from the trust fund. So apparently, his younger brother's under 30.
Yeah,
I
apparently.
what I'm taking from this. And then Brighton, of course, is chagrined to hear this. Because he's like, I'm not gonna have I'm not gonna have a date until I'm 30. And Fran is like, well, at least when you're 30, you'll be rich. When I turn 30, I'll be 40.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Exactly.
so Maxwell is gonna leaving, and Nanny Fran calls after him, Shamar, and he's like, that's au revoir. And she's like, no, I meant Shamar, it's duty free, you know, trying to hint that he should pick some up for her. And then she calls out as he leaves, Chanel.
Exactly.
Oh, wait, you forgot your bag. And she is the one who ends up picking the wrong bag and giving it to him.
Yep.
And he leaves, going through the swinging door, just as Grandma Yetta is coming in through the side door of the kitchen.
Right.
And Fran's like, oh, did you come in an ambulance? Because there's like an EMT, like a paramedic with her. And that person explains that they saw her walking down the side of the road and she complained of having, like chest pains. But as soon as they got into this neighborhood, she suddenly felt better. And she's just like, it's a miracle.
Uh-huh.
So Fran, is trying to get, I guess Grandma Yetta is going with them to the groomers. And
Yeah.
so she asks them to get the bag. So Brighton takes the bag over. Grandma Yetta's opening it. Because at first, you know, Brighton's like, oh, Chester, like there's no noise. And is the dog dead? He's not dead, just sleeping. And of course, that's something Grandma Yetta's heard before. Um,
Yeah, she
but
gets it all the time.
yeah. And so they open up the bag, and Fran's still not like right next to them. And Grandma Yetta pulls up, like, is it a sweater, a shirt, like
Yeah,
some
it's
type
like a
of clothing?
turtleneck or yeah.
Yeah. And, she makes the comment of like, oh, she doesn't feed him enough because she has
Mm-hmm.
not realized that is not a dog. And,
Exactly.
and then Fran makes the connection. So she starts yelling, Mr. Sheffield, like trying to, chase after him.
Yep.
Uh, and that's the opening scene. Do you have anything to add to that?
I don't. I don't.
Okay. Will you take
Um,
us to the plane then?
sure. So, Fran, so we're now on the plane and we hear Fran shouting, Mr. Sheffield, Mr. Sheffield. And he's like sitting in his, what looks like the last row of first class, is it? I guess? Or the last row of first class.
Yeah.
Like I was going to say it was the first row, but the way Fran walked in, that wouldn't make sense. Anyway, the reason I say it is because there's no one in front of him. So we see him. Great. He's putting on the little like temporary headphones, the cheap headphones that airplanes used to give out. And he's like tapping on them because he thinks he's hallucinating. Well, he's not, because there's Fran. And she says, oh, thank God I found you. And he's like, what are you doing here? And she's like, well, you accidentally took the wrong bag I gave you.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, how did you get on? And she's like, well, I, had to buy a ticket with Miss Babcock's credit card, but don't worry, I'll give it back for a refund just as soon as I get off the plane. And then she's like, oh, of course, then if without a ticket, I can't get back into duty free to return this gorgeous little tennis bracelet I bought. And he's having none of it. She's like, go get the bag, go change out the bag. And so she walks away and she goes into the first class hold, I guess, cargo hold. I don't know what else to call it. She opens the door and she's like, Chester. Well, he's not responding because he's been tranquilized. So she does what any logical person would do, and she climbs in. And then as the flight attendant walks past, he presses the button and she gets locked in.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I should also mention that as she was walking there, the flight attendant was offering champagne. She's like, oh yes, I love first class. And so she has a little glass of a flute of champagne, which she's going to enjoy in the cargo hold as the plane is taking off, and she's shouting, help me, help me. But no one can hear her over the plane taking off.
Yeah. So I will say, like, how quickly that all happened, not really realistic, right?
Do you think it was realistic for Maxwell to get through security with a dog in his bag?
No, none of this is realistic because,
Correct.
again, so we're under the assumption that in her hurry to get to the airport, Fran took the time to pick up her passport so that she could get on an international flight.
And she also had time to shop in duty free and pick up a gorgeous tennis bracelet.
Yeah. Yep. And again, just in terms of like, because the flight attendants basically like, okay, cross check, ready, to go and stuff. There was no demonstration, no safety demonstration. There was usually you taxi for a bit before
Right.
it gets super loud. But yeah, I mean, classic, right? She gets stuck in the I think they refer to it as like the closet or something, the first class closet, with her flute of champagne.
Yep. And she just makes peace with it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in fairness, what else was she going to do?
Yeah. So then we are back in the Sheffield home in the living room, and Grandma Yetta's there with Gracie, and they're like, Gracie's talking about, about how she had played dress up with Fran's clothes, but everything's too tight. And then Grandma Yetta holds up kind of like it's a bra, but more brassiere. I don't know. Like it's a
Is it
bit
a
more
bustier? Is that what you call it?
bustier, maybe. Yeah. And she kind of holds it up to herself, and she's like, "Oh, does this still, because this would be great for summer."
Mm-hmm.
And meanwhile, Maggie is like in the room in a chair, and she's, saying to them that she has a book report, but they're out of it at Blockbuster. So
Yup.
she, Grandma Yetta, do you know anything about the Titanic? And Grandma Yetta starts talking about, oh, there was a midnight buffet and the ice sculpture, huge. And that's just a quick little scene to see what's happening back at the Sheffield residence. Do you have anything to add to that?
I don't.
Okay, you take us back to the plane then.
Yeah, so we're back. We're back on the plane, and we hear Fran shouting, "Help me! Help me!" And Maxwell is standing right outside the closet. We assume he went to the bathroom or something, and he comments to a passing flight attendant, "That talking pig sounds just like my nanny." And then the disembodied voice, starts shouting, "Stewardess! Stewardess!" And so Maxwell presses, and he's like, "Oh God." And he presses the button, and there she is. And she's like, "I thought I was going to suffocate." And then she sees him, and she's like, "Oh, going down, ladies' lingerie." And he's like, "Get out of here." He pulls her out, and thankfully she takes Chester with her, or so we assume that she's found Chester. And she explains to him to calm down. "I was just trying to switch the bags, and I accidentally got caught locked in the closet. It could happen to anyone." And he's like, "But it doesn't happen to anyone. It only happens to you, Mrs. Carmichael." And so he leads her over back to his seat, and apparently he didn't have anyone sitting next to him. So he gets her to sit down, and there's this whole thing about she wants to sit at the window, but he was sitting at the window, so he lets her sit at the window. And then she's like, "Oh, but you can't really see the movie screen from here." And so he like begrudgingly gets up and switches with her, and she's like, "Thank you, thank you." And so she like takes out the blanket that was folded up on the chair, and she's like, "Ma used to make all the beds with these blankets. Until I was 6, I thought that our initials were TWA." And then she's looking at the little china bowl, and she's like, "Oh, look at this, my sister's china pattern." And Maxwell's like, "If you're here, who's taking care of the children?" And she's like, "Oh, it's Grandma Yetta, but don't worry, she raised my mother, and look how normal she." And then she realizes what she's saying, and she's like, "Give me the phone, give me the phone." And so Maxwell, pays for the phone that's built into the armrest, and he hands it to her. And so she calls the house, and we only hear her side of the conversation. "Hi, Grandma Yetta, it's Fran. I'm calling you from the aeroplane. I know, it's amazing. If they could put a man on the moon." "Sure they did. Neil Armstrong." "No, He's not the one that's saying love on the rocks, but I could understand. And Maxwell just grabs the phone. Give me that. Get Niles on the phone, would you? What? No, I most certainly will not. Love on the rocks. And he starts singing. And then he's like, really, is there no one else I could talk to? And so apparently Gracie gets the phone and he's like, Gracie, sweetheart, get Niles for me. And Fran's like, oh, talk to your daughter for 2 seconds. And so Maxwell does it, feeling bad, I guess. Hello, sweetheart. I love you and miss you very, very much. And I assume you consider this the same scene. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So then we flip to Niles, who's on the other end of the line. I miss you too, sir. No, we weren't worried. We figured it was something as simple as getting locked in the closet of a 747 in flight. Oh, here's Miss Babcock now. And he hands the phone to her. Mr. Sheffield for you. And Cece gets a grin on her face and says, Bonjour, Maxwell. Oh, how I wish I was with you dashing off to Paris. Hold on a minute. Nanny Fine is babbling something next to me in my ear. And she turns around and guess what? Fran's not there. And she's like, oh, she's babbling something next to you. Oh, isn't that funny? Funny, funny, funny. And she was holding a bottle of water, which she crushed, and then she threw both the bottle of water and the phone into the recycling bin.
Yep.
She is none too happy.
Nope.
Do you want to add anything, or would you like to take us to Paris?
Yes. So we are now at the hotel in Paris, and they're the is it what's the terminology for the guy at the hotel? Bellhop?
I think he's the bellhop. No,
I don't know. They're being shown into their room in Paris, and it's a very nice, like a large, nice looking room.
It's a beautiful room.
Maxwell's like, you're telling, this is the only available room in the entire city. What, is there a convention or something? And the hotel employee says, oh yes, people are flooding into the city for the new Andrew Lloyd Webber musical. Is opening. And so then before the hotel employee leaves, Fran kind of thrusts Chester at him with some money, asking, to make sure that he does a number due before he gets brought back. Mercy, mercy. So it's just then Fran and Maxwell in the room. And of course, this is like the classic, there's only one bed trope. There's only one bed. And again, Maxwell's saying how the jet lag is kind of catching up to him. And they both end up getting on the bed. And it's a large bed. I would say it's probably a king, right?
That's what I thought too, yeah.
And so they're on
but they lie down.
Yes, they both lay down, and but then they both kind of roll closer to the center. Kind of snuggle closer. And then Maxwell, though, like realizes and gets out of bed quickly, saying, oh, I'm feeling much better. And Fran's like, oh, but you look exhausted. And she kind of pats the bed, kind of like inviting him back. And, but then, of course, at that point, a change of topic in terms of, it turns out Maxwell had a nap on the plane. Fran did not, because there was a lobster caviar make your own Sunday bar on the plane, and she was not going to miss that.
Right.
But, so instead of sleeping, though, Maxwell's now, talking about, they'll have to meet up with Nigel. He's thinking about going to a restaurant. I can't say
lingerie.
That. Yes. But so he's gonna take a shower. So he just starts taking off his belt, like kind of like not even thinking about it.
Yep.
And as he pulls off the belt and starts unbuttoning his pants, he like looks back, and Fran, of course, is still on the bed, openly watching him.
Right. She's sat up now and she's like filing her nails.
Yes. Well, and he's like, why didn't you stop me? And she's like, well, I didn't want to ruin this, this trip either. obviously she was enjoying herself. As you were saying, she was kind of filing her nails as she was sitting there. But before we could get too much into that conversation, there's a knock on the door. And Maxwell, starts trying to adjust his pants. He's like, "Oh, it's probably Nigel. I haven't seen my him in 4 years." Um, and so Fran's like, "Oh yeah, yeah, like all of your feelings out or whatever." And when he opens the door, he greets Nigel by going, "Hello, young man," to which
Mm-hmm.
Nigel responds, "Max," and they just like shake hands.
Exactly.
It's like, "Oh, love." Yeah, so much emotion. And then Nigel, though, of course, Maxwell still hasn't fully adjusted his pants,
Right.
like
He's
his
holding his
belt or
belt.
anything like
His
that.
belt is
So
in his
he's,
hand.
yeah. And obviously, Fran's there as well. And so Nigel's just kind of like, "Oh, I should have called up ahead. Am I interrupting something? No, no, this is my nanny." "Oh, well, then where are the children?" In New York."
Mm-hmm.
Oh, nanny, like bank. No, Nigel. They're not involved in any way. And I can assure you she's not involved with anybody. And of course, Fran's like, "Why don't you just go to the window? They haven't heard you in Brussels."
Yup.
Uh, but anyway, they kind of get back on topic, and here comes the lecture. Um, and I believe is it Nigel who makes the comment that if you put a martini in one hand and Father's jewels in the other, then you're like mother?
Then you could be mother. Yes. That is Nigel.
Yeah. Because because again, Maxwell's kind of in the lecturing mode, right? Like business. He doesn't know what he's doing, he's young. And they actually get into a physical altercation, which is like actually not that impressive.
But did you catch why? Like what
Right?
set them
Like,
off? Did you catch what set them off?
mhm. I
So
have the initials ALW,
yes. Yes.
and I'm trying to remember what that stands for.
So Maxwell says
Andrew Lloyd Webber.
yes, it does. Um Maxwell says to Nigel that you know nothing about business. And Nigel responds, "What do you know? I used your name and couldn't even get into the new Andrew Lloyd Webber show."
Yep. Yep. And so they start kind of like shoving, pulling hair. They end up on the bed actually. And Fran gets in the middle, tries to pull him apart. Use your words. You're in both time out. And then Maxwell makes to go like get the remote control, and she's like, "No TV for you." Um, and then she actually gets a chance to kind of talk with him. He's very young, um, full of dough or rich or whatever. And is he 5 or 6'2", 6'3"? He's 1.5 or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And Nigel's still angry at Maxwell and says that he's a stuffed shirt and boring. And, he's going to be heading, out to his club, and it's going to be too late for Maxwell because it opens at 10, which, is after Maxwell's bedtime. And so Nigel leaves. And Maxwell, trying to get the last word in, kind of follows him out to the, doorway and yells down, I'll have you know, my bedtime is at 11 because I have work in the morning."
Yep.
And he comes back to the room, apologizes to Fran about putting on such a dreadful display. And Fran's like, "Dreadful display? Like, I've had 2 ants with bagels and only 1 piece of Lux left."
Mm-hmm.
And Lox.
Yes.
And yeah. So anyway, it's they're kind of trying to reassess. He's wanting to go home, but she's like, "No, no, like we'll go to the club, we'll do the sacrifice of going to the club, drinking champagne, eating French food since we
Mm-hmm.
made it here." And Maxwell makes the comment, he has a clean stuffed shirt, stuffed shirt.
Yep.
But it turns out it's only 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So, what can they do? And Fran's like, again, on the bed at this point, let me see, what can we do? And she like stretches on the bed to pass time. And he's like, it's fine. And then she's like, let's go. Take me. And then she hops off the bed, shopping.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Do you have anything to add to that scene?
Just on that last point, what she originally says is, let me see. What could a man and a woman do to kill a couple of hours in Paris? And she says it very seductively.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I wanted to add.
Yep.
So,
yeah. You have a quick scene then?
I have a very quick scene. So, we flash back to the Sheffield home, and Yetta is lying on the couch with her feet up, her shoes off, and she still has that brown sweater on her lap, and she's stroking it as she reads because she still thinks it's Porchester. And so Cece asks Niles, "Where's Maxwell? I've been trying to reach his room all day." And Niles says to her, "Try Miss Fine's room, 4592." And Cece says, 4592 is Maxwell's room. And Niles is like, "I know. Isn't that funny? Funny, 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 funny." Just like she did with her reaction to Fran going to Paris. So, yeah.
Yep.
It's a very short scene.
And then we get another quick like montage after that quick scene.
Mm-hmm.
Because basically we just see Fran and Maxwell going around Paris shopping, eating, they're laughing, they're holding hands, they're drinking, just a great old time. Do you want to take us to the club?
Oh, can I just add a little bit more to the montage? So,
Yeah.
you're right that we see them eating, but like at one point, Fran has something on her fork and she like feeds him. They're, as you said, they're drinking. They walk through a park. They walk through a flower shop where he has bought her a single red rose. They eat ice cream together while they're shopping. He insists on going into a store with a bikini in the window. They walk past the Eiffel Tower and they're under an umbrella together. They visit Notre Dame, sorry, wrong way to pronounce that. So yeah, it looks, and also in their shopping, she's switched out of what she was wearing to travel into a white suit and white heels. And yeah, that's all I wanted to add.
Okay.
So we're now at the club. We're at Nigel's club, and it's clearly a jazz club. We see Eartha Kitt is singing on stage, and we go back and forth from seeing her singing to Fran and Maxwell at their table enjoying the song and having a good time. When she finishes up her song, one of the waiters comes over and Maxwell orders in French, to which Fran says, "Oh, Tish, I love it when you speak French."
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when Nigel comes over and he greets them, and he greets Fran with a kiss on her hand. And he comments to Maxwell that, "Isn't this a little late for you, Max?" And Fran's like, "Oh, he took a little nap." And then realizes that she probably shouldn't have said that.
Yep.
And so Eartha Kitt comes over and Nigel introduces her to his brother and his nanny, which he puts in air quotes. And so Frank gets up, "Oh, Miss Kitt, you're incredible. How do you stay so young?" And she says, "Well, I have a nanny too. Lorenzo, darling," and she calls out to a young, handsome looking man. And so then she meets Maxwell, and Eartha Kitt's like, "Oh, two handsome gentlemen in the same family. Mm-hmm. And Fran's like, all right, back off, Catwoman." And I think Nigel comments to Maxwell that the place is packed. Not bad for an immature child who knows nothing about business, eh, Max? He picks up the bill and he says, "This one's on me." And he walks away and he greets the people. He's working the room. And Maxwell comments, "Would you just look at him working the room, picking up the tabs? Just wait till he spends a few sleepless nights wondering whether the thing he's poured his heart and soul into is going to go under or not. Oh, he's such a dreamer." And Fran's like, "Wish you were him?" Maxwell's like, "Yeah." And Fran's like, oh, and he says, "Yeah." And so then Maxwell continues, "I was him once. What happened, Miss Fine? What happened to my passion?" And Fran's like, oh, I don't know. Maybe becoming too successful, you lose your passion. I know sometimes when I wake up in my mansion, in my Ralph Lauren sheets, and I look out my window at Park Avenue, I think, oh, maybe I'll just sleep in. Niles can get the kids ready for school. And then she realizes what she said. But enough about me. And
Mm-hmm.
Maxwell's like, do you know what I'm going to do, Miss Fine? And she's like, fire me? And he's like, I'm going to get my passion back. And Fran's like, well, I'm right behind you, baby. And he's like, first thing I'm going to do is tell my brother, good show. Then I'm going to ring my mother and tell her to sod off. And Fran is like, she has a compact out and she's like fixing her face. And she's like, and the passion part would kick in exactly when? And he's like, right now. I'm going to go for it, Miss Fine. I'm going to grab the brass ring. I'm going to get back in touch and just do it. And Fran's like, go, grab, touch, do. And she holds out her hand very much in the way that Cece did to the French tutor who was engaged to Fran. She's like, did I mention touch? And he's like, for God's sake. And he grabs her hand. I'm in Paris with a beautiful woman. Come on. Let's blow this nightclub and see where life takes us. And at this point, they're both standing and he's grabbed her and he's holding her against him. And her response is, rawr.
Mm-hmm.
And we all think that they're going to be passionate and they're going to grab, touch, and do. But what do?
They're on the next flight home.
Yep.
In the same outfits they were wearing at the club. So seemingly just went straight to the airport. And she's like, oh, yes, yeah, taking the next flight home, really,
Definitely
she's
the right
obviously
thing.
disappointed, right? Yeah. And, and they actually have a couple of layovers before, it's going to be another 19 hours before they get home.
Yep.
Well, they start feeling a little bit of turbulence. And he's like, oh, don't worry about it. Just a little. And I don't know exactly, like, think of it like hitting a deer or like
Well,
just something. And what does he say? Because I
so
have what she responds.
he says, you have to picture yourself going along a little country lane with a few dips and potholes.
Yeah. But basically, she's like, like hitting a deer. We're in the air, like, why would there be such a big kind of jolt, right? And then we get some more turbulence, and Maxwell me was like, what the bloody hell was that? And then we hear, the advice is, always, and I think it's Fran saying, my mother always told me, look at the stewardesses.
Yeah.
Because they'll indicate, whether or not something's a problem. And of course, at that moment, the flight attendants come through. Oh my God, stay in your seats. Like they're freaking out, obviously.
Yep.
And so of course everybody kind of starts freaking out. And Fran, of course, is like, look at me, like, first class with a handsome millionaire. Of course the plane would go down. Like what else?
Right.
And of course the flight attendant comes back through, yells at Fran, put your damn tray away. Do you want us to die?
Right. Do you want to get us all killed?
Yes. And so of course Fran hurriedly puts her tray away. And so Fran, again, this is where they're like thinking they're going to go down, right? So she's like, I just wanted to let you know the last 3 years were the best years of my life. And like Max was like, oh my God, my children. And like, they're both having these moments, right? And Fran says, this would be a good time to call me Fran. And then they just start kissing.
Well, so there was more turbulence and they like grabbed onto each other and then they were like inches apart. And then who do you think kissed whom?
I didn't pay that close attention.
Okay. Well, lovely listeners, let us know who you think kissed whom first.
Because it was kind of mutual.
I used to think it was mutual, but rewatching it today, I think Fran kissed him.
Okay. But then as they pull apart, it is Maxwell who says, I love you. And then the oxygen masks come down and you see them kind of looking frightened. And it's like, then it's frozen, right? And it says
Mm-hmm.
to be continued. But this is the last episode of the season.
Mm-hmm. The only thing you missed is that so they kiss. Maxwell says, "I love you." They kiss again, and then the masks fall from the ceiling.
And then they pull away and kind of look scared.
Yes. Sorry, I needed to point out that they kissed a second time.
Yes. Yes, you did. Thank you.
So I have nothing
And
to add.
that's the episode.
Yeah, yeah, it was. Is there anything you want to talk about before we get into our shticks, or
We already kind of talked about just like logistically how this wouldn't happen.
yeah,
But yeah. Um
we need to
uh,
suspend our disbelief for this
yes,
episode.
it is definitely a work of fiction.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Um, but were you surprised that Maxwell said, "I love you"?
I like okay, not really, just because of like how they thought they were gonna die, you know? But it was
Mm-hmm.
still a nice like um so I can't say I necessarily expected, but I wasn't surprised, if that makes any sense.
Okay.
What about you? I know
No,
you've seen it
I mean,
probably a million times.
yeah, I've seen it a billion times. So this is, yeah. Um, but like considering where we are in our character development, like it seems like it's a huge step for Maxwell to say to her, "I love you." Even if he thinks he's about to die. He did it.
Yeah.
He said it to her anyway. Um, sorry. I just anyway. Um, is there anything else you want to talk about, or shall we jump into our favorite fashion?
Let's go into favorite fashion.
Did you have a favorite outfit?
Um, trying to think back through.
So
I think she
there,
looks nice in the club, right? Can you describe it a bit for me?
yeah. So that is actually my favorite outfit she wears in the episode. So
Mm-hmm.
it's again a floor length gown, and parenthetically, as an adult woman, I do not have many, if any, occasions to wear floor length gowns. So I'm sort of jealous here. But she's wearing this floor length gown that is like the creamish silver, and then over it is like a black pattern of flowers and designs, and it has like a um, so it also has these horizontal stripes, like bands, I guess is a better way to describe it, where it's darker pattern. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then it has these really thin spaghetti sleeves, and she's wearing a black choker, and she has her hair, you know, up, but then like coming down, behind it, sort of like a very large, I don't want to call it a ponytail because it's not, but she has all of her curls, and she looks fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that is my favorite outfit in this episode.
Yeah. I would probably agree.
I also really liked the outfit she bought while in Paris, which is, one of those like two-piece suits that she likes to wear. It's white with orange and like yellow trim. Plus it has a white headband, and that looks way more comfortable than the like bright orange plasticky pantsuit she was wearing on the flight to Paris.
Yeah, I was not really a fan of that
Mm-mm.
orange plastic
No,
look.
no, me neither.
So,
But I will say I thought it was a little unrealistic for the outfit she picked out in Paris to have white heels. I mean, if I was a tourist and I was doing all that shopping, I would want flats.
yeah. Yes. But she's probably thinking more about fashion than comfort.
True, true. Um, that was the fashion I wanted to talk about.
Yep.
Um,
So then notable New Yorkers. Um again, just like I feel like in general there's a lot of blank in Paris kind of titles and references. So I didn't
mhm.
think of a specific reference regarding the title of this episode. Did you?
I didn't. Um, I will say when I Google pup in Paris, the first most of the results are for the nanny, but it's also possible that Google has learned that that is one of my interests. So it tailors
Yeah.
its options, its responses.
Did you look up Dexatrim by chance?
I did not. But it is a that is not it. I believe it's something that it's a diuretic, I believe.
Yes. Shamar? Shalmar?
Shalimar.
Shalimar.
So Shalimar is and I quote, legendary fragrance, which is described as and I quote, a hauntingly sensual, timeless scent in an iconic bottle symbolizing a mythical, incandescent love story. And that's according to our friends at Guerlain.com.
Chanel.
A French luxury house started by Coco Chanel. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia. You missed Cujo.
Oh, yeah, I did miss Cujo.
A 1983 horror film based on Stephen King's novel by the same name about a mother and son cowering in their car from a rabid St. Bernard. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
We've had that reference before.
We did. We had that in the episode with lamb chop on the menu, I believe.
Titanic.
So there are two references here. One is
yeah.
So there's the film, and then there's the actual boat. The actual boat, I should say ship, sailed in 1912 in April. It was the largest luxury liner at the time. It was called the Unsinkable Titanic. Guess what? It sank. It hit an iceberg, and over 1,000 people died. And it's because the Titanic that cruise ships are required to have enough lifeboats to transport every single person on board. So,
yeah, and earlier before that was the reference to Blockbuster too.
Correct.
And so then Mrs. Carmichael.
It's a reference to Lucille Ball and the Lucy Show.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So according to our friends at IMDb, the Lucy Show was a television series that ran from 1962 to 1968. It starred Lucille Ball, whose character was Lucy Carmichael.
Now, was TWA like for the blankets?
That is a reference. No. Okay. It's a reference to Trans World Airlines, which we've talked about previously. It was a major airline for 71 years. It was one of the big four domestic airlines. And that's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Then we get, in quick succession, Neil Armstrong, who should not be confused with Neil Diamond.
Correct. Neil Armstrong was the first man to walk on the moon in 1969, according to our friends at Wikipedia. Neil Diamond, on the other hand, is an American singer and songwriter who is considered one of the best-selling musicians of all time. His hits include Love on the Rocks, which poor Maxwell had to sing part of to Grandma Yetta, and also Sweet Caroline. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Yep. And then Andrew Lloyd Webber.
Yup.
As always, we get.
Exactly.
Yeah. And let's see here.
So Miss Ellie in South Fork, Fran makes a comment when they get into the hotel that I think Miss Ellie in South Fork had this exact pattern or whatever. So that's a reference to Eleanor Ewing Farlow from the television show Dallas. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia. Maxwell comments that, his brother was going to get to the hotel room any minute now, and he thought they'd get a quick bite at Lingerie, which is a restaurant located in the Four Seasons that has, and I quote, light, balanced, and innovative food with an emphasis on plant and fish-based dishes and dairy. So that's according to our friends at fourseasons.com.
Okay, and then we have do you have anything prior to the club scene else?
Yeah, so there's the song I Love Paris playing during the montage. And that's a 1953 song that was written by Cole Porter. It's been sung and recorded by many people, including Etta Jones, Frank Sinatra, Doris Day, and Ella Fitzgerald. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia. It probably should have included on the list the Eiffel Tower and Notre Dame. I want to make sure I'm pronouncing it right.
Yeah. And then, like in the club, obviously, you mentioned Eartha Kitt.
Yep. So she was an American actress and singer who is known for her role as Catwoman, hence the comment by Fran, back off Catwoman. Um,
Hmm. And then,
she's oh,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say that her career suffered after she made anti-Vietnam War statements at the White House in 1968, but then she actually returned to Broadway 10 years later, and she eventually starred as I think I'm gonna pronounce strong Yasma in The Emperor's New Groove.
Okay.
That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Okay. And then, oh, Tish, I love it when you speak French. I'm assuming is an Adams Family reference.
That's the only thing I could find. That's what apparently what Gomez would say to Morticia when she'd speak French. And that's
Or
according to
any
her.
language.
Oh,
I
really?
think it was like a running gag that like anytime she said anything in a foreign language, it was I love it when you speak French and like kissing her up and down the arm.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. And that would be similar to how Fran put out her arm to Maxwell, and she's like, "Did I mention touch?" Like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Ralph Lauren.
that I didn't look that one up. I missed that one.
Yeah, designer. I think we've talked about.
I think we have as well.
Yeah. And then yeah, I am out.
So
Do
I
you
have
have
two.
okay.
So the male flight attendant on the flight out was played by Tim Bagley, who, according to our friends at IMDb, is known for his roles on things such as Grace and Frankie, Will and Grace, Call Me Cat, Young and Hungry, and Happily Divorced, which is a show that Fran Drescher starred in after The Nanny.
Hmm.
The other one, I'm only going to mention briefly, is the actor who plays Nigel is Harry Von Gorkum, who also appeared in Fran Drescher's later series Happily Divorced. And I thought he also appeared on things such as Friends and Seinfeld and Just Shoot Me. And IMDb's mini biography notes his reoccurring role on The Nanny as one of his more notable American performances. So
Hmm.
I like it when The Nanny's notable.
Yep. Okay, so then are we ready for some Yiddish cup?
We are. I only had one, which is lobster is not kosher, which
Mm-hmm.
I've said before, and I will say again. I will say it again and again and again.
Yeah.
Lobster is not kosher. So
Mm-hmm.
90s nostalgia?
There's a ton of 90s
Mm-hmm.
nostalgia. So, first of all, in terms of a plot point, given the amount of time between when like that Maxwell left and Fran realized it was the wrong bag, like in this day and age with cell phones, that could have been easily remedied
Correct.
far before you would actually get to the point that you're at the airport.
Agreed.
So that, and then again, just like the whole plot point of her being able to just like, I don't know, make it through security by, like buy a ticket, make it through security, all that kind of stuff to catch a last minute plane to Paris. Like, I'm sure some people might have to do something like that, but it's much more, I feel like, an arduous process these days.
Agreed. Agreed. You're right on both points. I'm gonna start by saying old cars because we didn't have them last
Mhm.
week. Um, but a lot of the other flying things to me seemed very dated. So, for example, TWA no longer exists.
Mhm.
Um, Maxwell and the little flimsy headphones that he was handed, by the airline. They don't
Mhm.
make them like that anymore, I don't think. The fact that there's a single movie screen that
Yep.
they needed to be able to see, like I think a lot of planes now have individual screens.
Mhm.
Um,
Especially first class.
oh yeah, exactly. Um,
And
what
we
about?
forgot to mention then Babe in our
Oh, we
notes
did.
about
You're
her.
right. Thank you. The talking pig film.
Mhm. And then another thing in terms of flight is them referring to the flight attendants as stewardesses. That's very dated.
Yes, you are right. Um, I don't know. Do planes still have
Oh.
what?
The phone, like that's built in that he used the credit card to like
Yeah, that was my question. Do they still have those?
I don't know because you can buy Wi-Fi. Like that's the thing. It's like typically you can purchase minutes for Wi-Fi while you're traveling. I have never actually flown in first class, so I wouldn't know what kind of amenities they have up there. Um,
So
but I,
clearly you're missing the free champagne that Fran partook in.
except that I'm allergic.
I'm just saying
I'm
that
allergic.
seems like the perk.
Yeah, but not to me specifically.
So it's not worth it.
No. um, but yeah, so like I mean, and again, in terms of just the amenities, like this day and age, like you have like fully, like you can make your seat like fully flat, in first class to
Mm-hmm.
sleep. So far beyond what is, shown in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, again, also in terms of phones, when Maxwell comes in to the kitchen talking with his mom, and it's the cordless
Yep.
phone.
The reference to Blockbuster.
Mm-hmm.
We had one of
Yep.
those a couple weeks ago as well. Um,
Yep.
the idea of a movie rental being out in the age of streaming seems so unlikely now.
Mm-hmm.
Maxwell's suits to me all looked very dated.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed.
And then I think I'm out.
I think I'm out as well.
All right. It's time to update the kiss count. Would you like to do the honors?
Yes. So prior to today's episode, we were at 10. And as you pointed out, there are actually two kisses in this episode. So we are now up to 12.
Woohoo!
Woo!
Ah,
Yep. So do you want to give us some future fun?
yes, I do. So first off, Fran and Max do not perish in a horrible fiery plane crash disaster. So everyone can be relieved. We still have 3 whole seasons to go. You will not be relieved to learn that Maxwell's confession does have some disastrous consequences, as we'll see over the next season and more than the next season, I'll put it that way. But for those who are concerned, please don't worry. This is not the only time that Maxwell uses the L word or calls Fran by her first name. There's actually an entire episode in season 5 titled Call Me Fran, which we'll talk about in a while. So I also kind of hinted at this before that Maxwell's brother this is not the only time we meet him. He's in 2 more episodes, including one where he asks Fran to marry him and she tries to accept his proposal. So there's that. And then finally, this is not the only international travel that Fran and Maxwell undertake. They will also go to Bermuda with the family. I think I talked about this last week. They will go to England and to Kurdistan. So we have a lot of future fun ahead of us.
It's a good thing she has a passport that apparently is easily accessible.
Exactly. Yeah. So with that, I think it's time to rate the episode.
Mm-hmm.
As our wonderful listeners remember, we rate each episode from 1 to 5 lipsticks, and I think it's my turn to go first.
It is your turn to go first.
So I'm giving it a 5, if that was not made obvious by my tone of voice throughout this entire episode. I love this episode. I love it to pieces. I wish we didn't have to start season 4, because for those who've seen the series before, they know that things don't go as we would hope. I'm trying not to give too much away. I love this episode. As we've talked about, it makes absolutely no sense logically. Like, there's no way Chester would have gotten through security without being noticed. There actually recently been a number of news stories about people's pets being discovered, like going through security or having their luggage scanned. So like someone would have told him, hey, you're traveling with a dog, right? Like, this is not okay. But even though it makes no sense, I love the development of the characters. I love Fran and the scene in the hotel room where Fran is clearly like flirting with him. I love the montage of them enjoying their time in Paris. I love their experience on the flight where she tells him now would be a good time to call me Fran, and he tells her I love you, and they kiss. I just love that to pieces. So that's why it gets a 5 in my book. How about you, Bernadette?
I will also give it a 5.
Excellent.
I'm not as enthusiastic about it as you, but just still a 5. And obviously, very pleased we got to add to the kiss count this week. Again, you're pulling out in this episode the classic there's only one bed trope. There's a lot of double entendres throughout.
Yes.
Like you said, there's character development. So yeah, I'm very curious, like, and also wary.
So let me ask you
of the next of starting season 4 now with what you stated. But
so for our wonderful listeners, I've said to Bernadette, because I know where this is going, obviously. I told her that we needed to talk about this episode before she watches the first episode of season 4. So for all of our wonderful listeners who have not seen the series and do not want it ruined, you can say goodbye to us now and pick up next week with our season 3 wrap up. For those who have seen the series before, I've sort of hinted at, there are some disastrous consequences that are coming, and I didn't want to ruin Bernadette's perspective of this episode by the start of season 4. So anyway, long story short, to get to my question for you, Bernadette, now that I've warned that there's some not so great things coming, does that impact how you feel about this episode and how it ends?
At this point, not particularly.
Okay.
Because this is again contained in this season. And I feel like throughout this season we've just seen like continued kind of, to some extent, like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, 3 steps forward, 1 step back, kind of progression in terms of Maxwell and Fran's relationship. And I think this episode follows in that trend of like showing, okay, we're in a life or death situation now. Like the true feelings come out. But I mean, I could definitely see how this could lead to repercussions. And again, at this point, I don't know what those specifically are, right? I haven't watched the first episode of season 4, so
good.
I can't say where this is going. Now,
I do have every intention
I
of
might have
asking
things
you.
to say when we get there.
Yes, I have every intention of asking you after we see the first episode of season 4 how that makes you feel about the end of season 3.
Gotcha.
So,
yeah. So without seeing the fourth episode, or sorry, the first episode of season 4, I can't really say one way or the other.
Okay. But you like the episode, which is good. So, all right, that's what I wanted to talk about. Do you have anything else you want to chat about?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Well, then that's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited The Nanny. Join us next week when we'll wrap up season 3 before moving into season 4 with episode 76, The Tart with Heart.
If you'd like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at afinetimenannyrevisited@gmail.com. Have a great week.